Hi everybody, this is Chapter 3, Section 2, Energy Flow. Just like the first section, we're going to break this down into two parts. Now you'll see this list again at the end of this video and in Part 2's video. You'll notice in this section there are a lot of vocabulary terms. Many of these terms, though, you should probably already know. The three key concepts here, you also probably know most of these before we even get started. To start in Chapter 3, Section 2, Energy Flow, we need to talk about producers. Now, without a constant input of energy, living systems can't function. If you don't keep getting energy, you can't do a whole lot of things. Sunlight is the main energy source for life on Earth. That's where you get all of your energy from, indirectly. In a few ecosystems, though, some organisms obtain their energy from sources other than sunlight. Some organisms rely on energy stored in inorganic chemical compounds. These things aren't nearly as prevalent in your life, though, as things that get energy from the sun. Only plants, some algae, and certain bacteria can capture energy from the sun or from chemicals and use that energy to produce food. You can't go out in the sunshine, enjoy a nice sunny summer day, and fill up with food. You don't have the ability to make that conversion. Plants are the main autotrophs on land. In other words, things that can make their own food. Algae are the main autotrophs in fresh water and in the upper layers of the ocean. Because once you get below the upper layer of the ocean, light doesn't penetrate, and with no light, there's no way to make food. Photosynthetic bacteria, you guys remember the term photosynthesis from 7th grade, are found in tidal flats and in salt marshes. All of these organisms are autotrophs. In other words, they can make their own food. Autotrophs use energy from the environment to fuel the assembly of simple inorganic compounds into complex organic molecules. Now, inorganic compounds mean things that don't contain the element carbon, with the exception being carbon dioxide. Organic molecules are things that do have carbon. Now, if you remember from the equation last year in 7th grade of photosynthesis, you're taking inorganic compounds and making them into glucose, a carbon-based sugar. That's an organic molecule. These organic molecules combined and recombined to produce living tissue. You can take glucose and you can change that into, which is a carbohydrate, into proteins, into fats, which can be made into living tissue. Because they make their own food, autotrophs are called producers. Now, all of our energy comes from the sun, and the best known autotrophs harness solar energy through photosynthesis. During photosynthesis, autotrophs use the light's energy to convert carbon dioxide and water, CO2 and H2O, into oxygen and the energy-rich carbohydrate, glucose. This should be a review from 7th grade. Photosynthesis is responsible for adding oxygen to and for removing carbon dioxide from the Earth's atmosphere. This helps keeps the concentration of both of those gases pretty level in our atmosphere. There's a lot more oxygen than there is carbon dioxide, but it keeps the levels pretty constant. Now, some things produce food without any light available. These things live where sunshine can't penetrate, like the depths of the ocean. When organisms use chemical energy to produce carbohydrates, they do it through a process called chemosynthesis. There are several types of bacteria that perform chemosynthesis, and they represent a pretty large portion of living autotrophs. There are a lot of these things. We just don't interact with them in our day-to-day lives, so we don't think about them. Some chemosynthetic bacteria live in very remote places on Earth. That's why we don't interact with them. They live in volcanic vents way deep in the ocean floors and in hot springs where there may be light being able to penetrate because the water's not so deep, but it's so hot, it's boiling constantly, that most living things can't survive. Others live in pretty common places, like in tidal marshes along the coast. But these are also very, very harsh environments because they're really, really high salt concentrations. Now, when you move from producers through the process of making food, you have on the other end consumers. Many organisms, like us, can't harness energy directly from the physical environment. And organisms that rely on other organisms for their energy and food are called heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are also called consumers. Consumers, producers, autotrophs, and heterotrophs are terms that should be reviewed for you. There are many types of heterotrophs. Herbivores eat plants. That's a type of heterotroph. Carnivores, another type, eat animals. Omnivores, a third type, they eat both plants and animals. Now, the two new types of heterotrophs, at least as far as I can tell from your scientific study so far, are detritivores. Detritivores feed on both plant and animal remains and other dead matter. So a pretty easy example of a detritivore would be a vulture. When a deer gets hit and is dead in the ditch, you see the vultures coming down and eating that dead animal. Those are detritivores. They're eating the remains of once living things. The last one is a decomposer. The difference between a detritivore and a decomposer is a detritivore eats the remains. A decomposer doesn't eat it, it breaks it down. Here we're talking about bacteria or fungi, like a mushroom. All right, when a mushroom grows on a rotting log, it is breaking down the organic matter in that rotting log. Now, I told you that you guys would see this list of terms and concepts again. Here they are to wrap up our presentation. We'll continue with part 2 in just a little bit.